What can we learn from the tragedy that struck Antioch? Welcome to another episode of Prophetic Perspective. Today I'd like to talk to you about some of the tragedies that have struck in the Middle East. We're used to hearing about wars and rumors of wars, about unrest, even terrorism throughout the Middle East. But recently there was a great tragedy when an earthquake struck in Syria and Turkey, and yet it has dramatic importance to us even as Christians. When Luke purposed to write an account of everything that had happened in Jesus' life and ministry to his friend Theophilus, he wrote what we know of as Luke, the Gospel, and the book of Acts, containing the Acts of the Apostles. He described the way that the Gospel was spread throughout the known world back in that day and age. It's very instructive, even as you would turn to Acts chapter 11, that it was the persecution of Christians that caused them to spread beyond even Judea and Samaria. And so Luke tells about how Peter went first, of course, to Cornelius' house to begin proclaiming the gospel to the Gentiles, but very soon missionaries were traveling all over that region of the world. As a matter of fact, they came not only to cities throughout the area surrounding the Mediterranean. They went to Cyprus, which is the easternmost island in the Mediterranean, and they also came to Antioch, which was a prominent crossroads in Asia Minor, or what was known in that day and age as Galatia. And if you read in Acts chapter 11, verse 21, it says that the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch. How did Christians come to be in Antioch? Well, because a church was planted there. As a matter of fact, because believers had been persecuted and traveled there began to be a church. And so the elders still in Jerusalem sent Barnabas, that original son of encouragement, to Antioch. And realizing there was a growing presence of believers there, he went all the way to Tarsus to get Paul, bring him back to teach and to preach at Antioch. And so for the past 2,000 years, there has been a church at Antioch. Tragically, the nation surrounding Antioch has become anything but Christian. As a matter of fact, Turkey itself became Islamic a long time ago. And the height of its power, Turkey, known back in the day as the Ottoman Empire, was ruled first from a place called Anatolia, and then later in Constantinople, or what became the city of Istanbul. And it reached its heyday basically 400 plus years ago, under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent. Many pilgrims will recognize that name because it was Suleiman who commanded that the eastern gate of Jerusalem be bricked over, be walled up, lest a Jewish Messiah would be able to enter in. And yet, from historical statistics, we know that throughout much of the Ottoman Empire, there was a large presence of Christians in Turkey. As a matter of fact, at one time, they constituted the majority, even under this Islamic reign or rule known as the Ottoman Empire, the land where the apostles first shared the faith. And yet, following World War I, 1.3 million Christians were forcibly exiled from Turkey and sent to Greece. Within Turkey itself, it's estimated that up to 3 million native Christians were killed, including over 1 million Armenians in what has now been labeled as a genocide. If you go to the old city of Jerusalem today, there are Armenians who came to the Promised Land and then enclaved themselves within a portion of the old city, and it is still to this day the most isolated quarter of the city because of their fear of the persecution that they endured over 100 years ago in Turkey. So today, Turkey is ruled by a very militant Muslim who has actually reclaimed the Hagia Sophia, the largest Christian church in the world, and reverted it back into an Islamic mosque today. According to the BBC, in just the past 100 years, Turkey's Christian population has dwindled from over 20% to 0.2%. Which brings me back to Antioch, or what has been known in recent years as Antakya. You see, the earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria on February 6th virtually destroyed the city. So what are we to make of this modern day calamity? First of all, we should pray for the people of Antioch, both Christians and non-Christians alike. The loss of human life is such a tragedy that we cannot reduce it to a mere statistic. Second, we should support organizations that are providing human relief there in Antioch and in the surrounding region. Specifically, we should do so for those organizations that are proclaiming the name of Christ. In other words, they're helping as Christian organizations, demonstrating by deed that God's love is for all people through Jesus Christ. But third, we should ponder the truth that is conveyed in David's psalm, this being Psalm chapter 19. In verse 9, he says, "The judgments of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether." And that same sentiment is reflected in Revelation chapter 16, verse 7, and was actually cited by Abraham Lincoln in his second inaugural address. Speaking of Revelation, it was Jesus himself who said to the church at Ephesus, that he would remove their lampstand unless they repented for leaving their first love. Now hear me very carefully. I am not condemning the church at Antioch. And I'm obviously not referring to the church as merely the buildings that were knocked down in this recent earthquake. I'm referring to the body of Christ that has existed in that place for a number of years. What I am saying is that no church can point to its heritage and then claim contemporary health, any more than I can say, well, 20 years ago I was in good physique and good health. Well, just look at me today and maybe that's not reflective. No more than a person can say, well, my parents were Christians or my grandparents were godly people and hope to get to heaven on their coattails. The empty church buildings throughout Western Europe and the decaying state of faith in denominations throughout America, let alone our own tragically anti-Christian culture today, demonstrates that the visible church is in decline. Will the Son of Man find faith in America if he tarries much longer? Certainly not as much as was evident just a few generations ago. And every statistic tells this story. Our lampstand essentially is being removed. The question for you and me, brothers and sisters, is what about us? What about your faith? Are you standing firm? Is your spiritual health strong? Or are you wavering and wandering away from the Lord? I pray that you and your family remain true to the living God, and that your lampstand continues to burn bright, even in this very dark age. Godspeed.